Welcome back to Area DMG. I'm your host, Will Wesley, the Mile High Mouth, and for today's episode of Suki Nihon, we are looking at episode 5 of season 4 of Steven Universe. Future Boy Zoltron. So, there are some episodes of Steven Universe that are full of interesting fight sequences, interesting lore sequences, interesting character development. And then there are episodes of Steven Universe where it could practically be Steven does something dumb. Like, Steven eats an apple, I think was the joke they were making on Reddit about it. Yeah, literally. Okay, here's what happens in this episode. You know, Mr. Smiley, the guy who runs Fun World in the arcade and whatnot, in like the first season he was voiced by Sinbad, and then Sinbad left under mysterious circumstances and refuses to talk about it, and nobody wants to talk about it, apparently. And they replaced him with the guy from Superstore, who plays like he plays like a disabled guy in Superstore. So now he's the voice of Mr. Smiley. That's a little off-putting because they don't really sound like each other at all. In fact, the comic timing seems a little weirdly off, which is weird because Superstore is actually pretty great, and I suggest people totally check that out. It's worth it. I think that's on Hulu, and it's good. Anywho, Future Boy Zoltron. Mr. Smiley is seen setting up a fortune-telling machine called Future Boy Zoltron. It's similar to like the old Zoltron fortune teller machines, or many other variants like Raja fortune tellers, where you put in a nickel, a penny, a nickel, a dime, or a quarter. Actually, it went penny arcade, nickel arcade, then quarters, and now you've got things where people are loading up like $5 into a machine, and that's ridiculous, and that's what killed arcades. Seriously. But you know, pretty much you put in a quarter or a nickel, and the machine gives you your lucky numbers for the day, or it is as you wish, or it is decidedly so. Those types of answers. Like if you've got a magic 8-ball, you turn it around, and the thing that you get, like, the future is unclear. It's a fortune-telling gig. So, yeah. Well, Steven is not impressed by it, and he accidentally breaks it. So, Mr. Smiley is like, well, I'm going to put you to work to fix and repair this. By the way, if you wanted to purchase a brand new one of these, you'd looking at something for as low as $3,000 for some of the Raja stuff to about $10,000 for some of the more intricate ones, the more intricate mechanics. They're all delicate. They're all delicate machines, but you're looking at somewhere from $3,000 to about $10,000 US. So at maybe 25 cents per question, Steven's going to be there a while, probably. So anyway, Steven decides to like repay this by working for Mr. Smiley by pretending to be Zoltron. So, you know, like Steven dresses up as the character that was inside the little booth, and when people put in a quarter, gives them kind of pointed, manipulative answers, like, "Oh, you're right. No, this is right. This is right." Yeah. Because, you know, Steven's a bit of a busybody all the time. I mean, for a character who is, his powers are based on emotion, he is really insensitive to other people's emotions. Like, completely, they don't even address it. So, this is going okay. Steven's making the money, and it's pretty funny, actually. There's a lot of little visual gags. There's this great little visual gag with Onion that's worth it. There's quite a few different things which are pretty funny. This show is this particular episode is kind of a little more joke-oriented. And then, during this thing, when they're setting that up, Mr. Smiley mentions kind of offhand that he used to work in comedy. And it's kind of implied that maybe his jokes were a little bit more blue-collar. They're not, actually. In fact, this character who shows up, he's very depressed. He's got a British accent. He's very depressed. And his name is Mr. Frowny. And he used to work with Mr. Smiley as the one half of their comedy duo. Seriously, Mr. Frowny? Anywho, Steven gives Mr. Frowny some advice that doesn't seem to be working. Then Garnet shows up out of character, pretty much, and gives Steven a little bit of future vision to help him out. And then Steven's like, oh, I got to somehow make this right, but I only foresee sadness in his future. And then Steven tells Mr. Smiley about Mr. Frowny showing up and that Mr. Frowny's leaving. And so Mr. Smiley runs over there and tries to talk to Mr. Frowny. Steven, of course, follows him. And then Mr. Frowny and Mr. Smiley go into a little bit of their comedy bit. Then afterwards, they go, well, we really want this all to work. And a lot of this is full of, like, subtext, I guess. Okay. The basic idea is either you can look at this and say, oh, these characters were a comedy duo together and their comedy act didn't work out properly. And even though people tended to like the comedy act, it wasn't making any of them happy. So they just split and separated ways. And I'm like, the other thing is also that Mr. Frowny and Mr. Smiley are a couple. That's like the big subtext there. And if that's where the characters were going, and if Sinbad knew about that, that's probably why he left. Anyways, it may have been marketing constraints, or how expensive it can be to pay somebody, or scheduling conflicts, or it may have been that, because a lot of this particular show has that little subtext. You've got like Rebecca Sugar's very open about that, and that may also be one of the reasons why this show didn't get renewed for another season. After season 4, after season 4 and season 5. That may be it for Steven Universe. It won't get a movie or a season 6 unless the ratings go up, which is why they do the little Steven Bomb things. They've discovered that clumping the episodes together and making it an event tends to work out okay for the show. But I'm looking at this, I'm like, this is episode 5 of season 4. We just had all this stuff happen. And you should be setting it up for a better arc. You guys have a ship. You have a ship. You have a new fusion. Okay, you need to address the new fusion, the Smoky Quartz fusion, with Connie and with Greg. You need to address the ship that they have now. They can travel into space. They can bring this fight against the homeworld gems to the homeworld. They can literally do all sorts of things. And instead, they're hanging out in the town with these little stories which are kind of like, Oh, one thing I want to note about it, some pretty good jokes in this also. The type of comedy routine that they're doing is called Manzai. A Manzai comedy, or rather a comedy duo act. Like, remember like Abbott and Costello and such? Kind of like that, but in a Manzai thing, you've got a person who's trying to do a bit, and then they get the bit wrong. Like you have one character who's suggesting a bit, the other character's reading into the bit, and they keep going back and forth, but one of them keeps messing up and getting yelled at. The basic point of this joke is literally that the character that's supposed to be sad, Mr. Frowny, will crack up laughing or giggle at a joke that's out of character. The whole point is the breaking character. And so the little comedy routine they do in the show here, where he breaks character at the end, is actually correct, which is kind of funny, which means that the comedy act, they weren't actually being fulfilled by this comedy act because they were doing it wrong. I'm like, oh, I see what you're doing here, Manzai. If you look it up, you can find some really good subtitle ones, but I guess the best way to put it would be like, you have character A and character B. Like, it would be like, say character A would be like, let's say you were trying to set up the who's on first gag, right? So the character would be like, "Oh, did you see the game last night?" And the other one would be like, "I certainly did. Wasn't it exciting?" The other one would be like, "Absolutely, that grand slam in the 9th inning was amazing." And the other one would go, "Yeah, and the elbow drop and suplex in the 3rd round was fantastic too." That's not baseball. Essentially, it's kind of like in, say, Azumanga Daioh, they talk about this. Like in, say, some of the other districts in Japan, it's either a no, like a harsh rebuke, sometimes accompanied with physical violence, which is kind of like, okay, here's your comedy routine. They're doing the comedy bit, and then one person messes up. There's some pretty good examples of it on YouTube. It's just not one that translates too well. But it does translate well in this one because they actually pull it off at the end, even though that was not what their original act was. It's actually what the original act was supposed to be. At the end of the episode, let's talk a little bit about comedic timing, actually. At the end of the episode, Mr. Frowny and Mr. Smiley are like, yeah, they finally got the gag correct. And then Mr. Frowny's leaving on the bus, and then Mr. Smiley's like, oh, well, that was good. And then Steven's all like, well, I guess that repays you. Because, that's the right thing for Steven to say, because his character's oblivious. And he's like, well, I guess you got repaid for that. And then Mr. Smiley's like, Steven, that machine costs thousands of dollars. And then there's a line that Steven has after that where he's like, I foresee leg cramps in my future. And let's talk about comedic timing. The little bit at the end where Steven's all like, I foresee leg cramps in my future is not necessary. It's actually not necessary. You can end it at the part where Mr. Smiley delivers the, Steven, that machine costs thousands of dollars. And then you're good. That's good. You've got a deadpan delivery. You end there. Sometimes you can overwrite a joke. You can definitely overwrite a joke. And this one has a lot of examples of that. Some of the visual gags were fantastic. Like, oh, you should Zoltron says you should consult your doctor on that. That's great. Or the part with Onion was pretty funny. The part before that with where he's talking to Petey at the fry area there, was pretty funny too. There's some pretty good little jokes in here, some good visual gags. But overall, I feel that this episode was okay. Unless something comes of this, unless Mr. Frowny is yellow diamond in the sky. No, just kidding. Unless there's some actual stuff to this, it kind of feels like I don't think this episode was really that good. I mean, there's some good jokes in it, but I feel like it's kind of wasting time that they could be doing to an overall story arc. You have a lot of unanswered question threads. You have all sorts of potential threads. You have an interesting threat and action to this. And this show tends to meander sometimes. When it's good, it's really, really good. But when it's bad, it's kind of frowny. Overall, I was like, well, I wouldn't have felt bad on this episode if it had been part of, say, one of the Steven Bomb things, had been like a Tuesday or Wednesday episode, and we were building towards something amazing on Friday, or some type of new character reveal or whatnot. It just felt like this is an episode that didn't need to be. But that's just my thoughts on it. If you really like this episode, let me know in the comments below. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't already. Go ahead and like this. Share it if you haven't already. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And until the next episode comes out, whenever that may be, you are now caught up.